This one works in the back? Beautiful. So before we get started, Bob will make an announcement.
Yeah, we're very grateful for the San Jose Peace and Justice Center for making this space available for us and other organizing activities. A lot of grassroots organizations, the Peace Center is the center, and it is about peace and justice. So they are a nonprofit, and they live up to that name. So if you can help out, I'm going to pass around the donation bucket. So whatever you can afford, please help out the Peace Center. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
And donate generously, y'all, because freedom ain't free. And these are people doing the work on the ground every day. So please donate generously.
All right. So as everyone does that, we're about to start our event. This is the history of resistance and interconnectedness of struggles from Oakland to Palestine. We're so grateful to have Dr. Butch Ware with us today. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you. This event is a collaboration between a few different groups. We have Vigil for Gaza. I want to shout out Bob and Mona for helping make this happen. San Jose Against War. Shout out to Druzy, Andy, and Philip. And the Black Outreach team is still here. And to Noura Khoury, who brought us all in one place. So the format that we'll use will be a conversation. I will be trying to ask Dr. Ware a few questions, and we'll go back and forth on some of his thoughts, and at the end we'll do some open Q&A from the audience. So save all your questions to the end. You will have some time to do it. And yeah, first thing I like to do in these conversations is to help us get grounded and centered around what matters in the world. We're over 700 days of genocide in Gaza, and the question I always like to ask to you, Dr. Ware, was there a particular moment or a person, a martyr from Gaza that stuck with you in the last 700 plus days? I like to ask this question, and I know it's heavy, but we have to remember every person we've lost in Gaza is a person, they're not numbers. And I always like to center the people in any of these conversations. So.
Thank you for the opportunity and warmest greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum, shalom aleichem, peace and power to everybody that's here. There are two that immediately leapt to my heart, and thank you for this question because no one has asked me this question. No one has asked me this question. So there are two. The first is Hind Rajab. Because it was something about the pictures of her. She looks just like my niece Aliyah. And I just wept and couldn't stop weeping. And the idea of 355 tank rounds being emptied into a vehicle that held a child demonstrates that there is no end, no bottom to the heartlessness that we are fighting against. And every time I feel broken reflecting on Hind, I just am reminded that in my faith tradition, she's enjoying the Feast of Martyrs. The struggle is over for her, and it is incumbent upon us in her name to fight so that it don't happen to nobody else. The second one is Rafat. Because for me, Rafat al-Arir was the Malcolm of Palestine. Rafat never missed. Never missed. He's batting 1,000. And it was his unvarnished truth-telling, the danger of his pen that made him a weapon. But I believe that when the stories are finally told, that Rifat will be shaping future revolutionaries from beyond the grave, the way that Malcolm shaped me, the way that Malcolm shaped so many of us, that when his pen is liberated at the end of this genocide, that he will transform more lives from beyond the grave than he, from inside the ground than he shaped when he was on top of it. And so I try to remember both of them in my supplications, and I try to make my activism in the world, even though I know I can't do this, I try to make it up to the measure of the legacy that they left.
Thank you, Dr. Ware. We are the voice of Rafat. He asked us to be the voice, to tell his story.
Yep.
And all of us here are doing that. And I want to thank you for being the voice of so many that needed someone to speak up for them. Thank you. So I want to go back to talk a little bit about history.
Yes.
Go back to the very beginning, and I want to focus the first section of our conversation about the history of Black resistance.
Yes.
Why? How did it start? And can you tell us and educate people about the seeds that became eventually the more well-known movements of Black resistance in this country?
Yeah, and I'll just connect it, the two pieces through Malcolm, because I mentioned that Rifat is for me the Palestinian Malcolm. And Malcolm was actually the person that first caused me to study African history, to study the Black resistance tradition. I read Malcolm's autobiography when I was 15 years old. I read it cover to cover in one night. I went out and checked out an English translation of the Quran from my public school library the next day. I read that cover to cover the next night, and I converted to Islam before the week was out, and I was a Black radical before the week was out. Like, that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my induction into my faith tradition and to this history of resistance. And so Malcolm sent me to Africa to first study the roots of resistance, but Malcolm also taught me the relationship between Black resistance and Palestinian resistance. And I'll come back to that latter point in a second. But here's what Malcolm said. Malcolm said, if a cat has kittens in an oven, you don't call them biscuits. And y'all are gonna look at me like I'm crazy because you won't understand what Malcolm meant. But he continued, he said, you call yourself a Negro? Show me Negro land on a map.
That's right.
Negro, you come from Africa. Call yourself an African. If a cat has kittens in an oven, that don't make them biscuits. If you want to know who you are as a Black person, return to your source. Study the past. Because as I often say to my students, whether it's in my community education courses or in my university courses, the only time a colonizer takes your past from you is so that when they tell you who you are, you have no choice but to believe them.
Yeah.
You don't have another narrative. So in my academic work, I've been writing about the history of Black resistance to the slave trade, to imperialism, to colonialism, and the way that African indigenous traditions and Abrahamic traditions have been used to fight against this devilry of white supremacy and imperialism and capitalism literally for 5 centuries. And that's a history that they hide from you because they don't want you to know that as early as the 15 teens, there are slave rebellions being led by enslaved African Muslims in what's now Mexico City, to the point where the Pope is writing, not the Pope himself, but the Pope's undersecretaries are writing papal bulls saying, stop bringing Muslims because they're too rebellious. Stop bringing Muslims because they're too rebellious. And it wasn't of course just Muslims that rebelled. It was everybody, all people, African peoples drew on their sacred traditions, their cultural traditions, their faith traditions to find the resources to fight against this evil and this scourge. And it didn't start on plantations. It started on the West African coast. It started with massacres of European traders and so forth. So I've been writing that history because when you know that history and the deep roots of our resistance, then you understand that people like Malcolm don't just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
People like Malcolm are, the stone that the builder refused. They're people that have been, their generational memory is of people who fought hard enough to still be here and we are them, and they are us, and we are responsible for. So most of my father's family is just, plain old West African black, but also we have Seminole ancestry in that side of the family. So I often try to process things through indigenous principles as well. You don't just think about the debt that you owe to the ancestors that came before you, but you think of the debt that you owe 7 generations forward to your future progeny. So we study these deep pasts so that we can take the necessary action in the present, so that we can leave legacies of liberation for our seed that are not yet born.
Woo!
That resonates a lot with me. I keep hearing from people from oppressed communities that they feel in some parts of their lives a sense of defeat, or because they're so marginalized, they are so oppressed.
Yep.
And I think you've hit a couple of points where I think we have to remember and almost be proud and celebrate our ancestors who resisted and refused to give up despite everything they've lived through. And the fact that they're able to carry on not only culture, but also the will to continue to survive, as we're seeing in Palestine today, as we're seeing in every one of the black communities in this country and the indigenous who refuse to give up their identity and their core.
That's right.
So that we should be proud. We should wear that as a badge of honor, that we're descendants of these people. Mm-hmm. And I love your idea that we have to pass that on several generations forward, because we have to resist today.
That's right.
And make sure we see it through.
Amen.
Woo!
And I guess maybe to try to put a pin on it, I wanted to ask you, why do we as people resist? Like why do the Palestinians resist? Because all you hear from the other side, or the imperial colonizer, there's focus on the violence of the moment. And there's erasure of everything that's happened that led to that moment. So can you help us kind of get a soundbite for why do people resist?
We resist because it is a violation of our basic innate humanity and dignity to submit to injustice and oppression. It diminishes our essence. It robs us of our true selves. It alienates us from our true selves, and everything in us instinctively resists oppression and injustice. So we don't resist because we're Muslim. We don't resist because we're black. We don't resist because we're indigenous. We resist because we're human. And that resistance, every time that it is successful, it is rooted in a profound revolutionary love for humanity as a whole. It is anchored in whatever our specific ancestral or cultural or faith traditions are, but it reaches out, rooted in that earth, with branches and leaves and flowers and fruit that touch every part of the human family. And when I gave a Friday sermon day before yesterday, are we on Sunday today? Okay. Yeah. Day before yesterday, I gave a Friday sermon up in Sacramento, and I framed it around the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which is really important in my tradition. He said, "You will not enter the garden until you have known faith, and you will not have known faith until you have loved one another." And then he said, "Shall I tell you a thing that if you did it, you would love one another, spread peace. By the one who holds my soul in his hand, you will not spread peace until you are merciful." And then they said to him, "Messenger of God, we are merciful." And he said, "No." He said, "It is not mercy amongst yourselves. Rather, it is mercy in general. It is mercy in general. It is mercy in general." That while we are rooted in our identities and in who we are and in our cultures and our ancestral legacies, that the doors of the garden of this life or the next are closed to us if we do not become mercy and compassion for humanity as a whole, because it ain't mercy and compassion if it's only for your people. If it's only for your people, you have become an oppressor. if only you knew. And if you don't believe me, ask a Zionist.
Are you able to walk us through maybe more technical evolution of ways the black resistance evolved in the last 2 centuries, leading up to the Black Panther and maybe past that?
Excellent. So I do a Black Revolutionaries class at UCSB, and I've taught at University of Michigan before that. So usually I have 10 weeks to do this, but we're gonna try to do it in about 90 seconds. So stay with me. This is gonna go fast. The Chinese expression is it's gonna be like enjoying flowers from horseback. So the short version of the story is that there are radical anti-slavery abolitionist movements that start in West Africa in the 18th century, whose goal is not just to end the slave trade, but to end the institution of slavery itself. And I write about that in my first book, The Walking Quran, and it's actually the founders of the London Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade, the origins of European abolitionism, which was always told as though it emerges whole out of Christian do-gooderism. I actually found a book written in the 1780s by the Reverend Thomas Clarkson, the founder of the London Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade, where he documents in detail an African Muslim anti-slavery movement that abolishes slavery and the slave trade, and he said this was my inspiration in founding the London Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade. Your genealogies of liberty are fiction. They're a lie, and you never should have believed that the people that operated the largest forced migration in human history also taught humanity the meaning of freedom. Y'all should have called cap as soon as they said it, right? Because the people that ran slavery definitely did not teach you what freedom is. And so by uncovering these roots, the fact that you actually had radical abolitionist movements in Africa that were channeling directly into the Haitian Revolution, that were channeling directly into slave uprisings throughout the Caribbean and in Central America and in the US South. So I've written those histories. I've written those histories in part because one of the places where a lot of those revolutionaries kept turning up when I was looking into the historical sources was in the Sea Islands of South Carolina and Georgia, where my own family come from. Not far from Ware County, Georgia, where my father's fathers were enslaved. So the people, as we said before, that survived to fight in this time are the direct descendants of the people who were fighting in that time. I'll give you a very simple example of this. The greatest 19th century abolitionist, Frederick Douglass, usually claimed as the most photographed man of the 19th century. And by the way, quick historical footnote, Frederick Douglass is the reason why black men never smile in pictures. Because he was the most photographed man of the 19th century, and he never smiled in a photograph because he said that he did not want people outside the United States to think that the Negro had anything to smile about. So that's why you get ice grill out of black men in most photos. Well, Frederick Douglass, father was a white man, and his mother had been enslaved, and he ran and attained his own freedom. Her name was Bailey. There are no Baileys, white Baileys in any of those sea islands. But you know what there were a lot of? Bilalis. There were at least 4 different Bilali families, black Muslim families that were directly connected to those African revolutionaries in Africa. It's very likely that America's most famous black abolitionist was directly descended from West Africa's most famous black abolitionists. And when you follow those threads of struggle, it's not long before you are sitting alongside, Malcolm in his cell, and a new version of Islam is being taught to him at the same time that you still have people with living memories of their enslaved ancestors struggling for liberation in the Deep South. So these histories were never broken. They were just hidden from us. And when we recover those stories, we realize how rooted our abolitionism is today. That the struggle against the carceral state, the struggle to end not just police brutality, but prisons themselves, that this is a continuation of a generational ancestral struggle. and that we, as I said before, we have had this history separated from us, so that we don't know how deep the roots actually run. We don't know that even if you're not a black person, but if you're a Muslim, these are your stories too. If you're a resistance soldier, these are your stories too. Why do you not know the stories of the John Browns in your own family? If you happen to be, skin folk, right? You don't know those stories because they do not want you to uncover the revolutionary histories of resistance that are shared across our universal past.
And
Oh, I didn't get to the Panthers, but maybe you can circle back to that.
we will get back to
Okay,
them.
perfect.
And I think we'll get back to them maybe in this next
Great.
question, because I wanted to touch a little bit on the difference between the underlying systematic violence of systems of oppression that we live under. If you look at Palestine today, there's full apartheid.
Yep.
That's violent day in and day out. And that almost gets swept under the rug. If we talk about Jim Crow and all the history of even to this day, a lot of the ways the black community and the indigenous community in this country live, they experience systematic violence.
Yep.
And we tend to focus a lot on, like I said before, the act of resistance as the means of violence, and we forget about the underlying systematic violence of the whole system
Yep.
itself. And maybe the Black Panthers do come in because
Yep.
they get such a reputation, and depending on what education or what source of media
Yep.
you're listening to. But there's a lot of focus on them being those radical, violent, irrational people, and the same as we see in the Palestinian resistance
Yep.
today. And there's complete ignorance or attempt to bury the overarching system of
Yep.
violence that every person from the very day they're born gets to live with. And then my question is, how should this be flipped around? Why do we forget to, or how are we unable to help people see that the problem is the systematic violence?
This is such an outstanding question. So Frantz Fanon, the great Caribbean intellectual, goes on to become a psychiatrist and eventually a fighter in the Algerian liberation movement. In Wretched of the Earth, he says colonialism is not a thinking subject or a machine endowed with reasoning faculties. It is violence in its purest form, and it responds only to violence. So the discourse that conceals the violence, the everyday violence of oppression, and calls resistance violence, and calls violence order. That is the first chain that you have to break before you'll ever get free. And Malcolm was asked about the Mau Mau rebels once, and Malcolm said, we would never call what the Mau Maus do violence. When you resist violent occupation, that's not violence. Walter Rodney, the great African Marxist and my academic hero, he was one of the first black people to get a PhD in African history, and he was martyred for his political organizing in Guyana. You know, he did both things. He said, by what scale of morality would you compare the armed struggle of people who resist to the people who inflict violence on them in the first place? So self-defense is not violence. Because, and it's for a very simple reason. If I hit you over the head and take your stuff, I am guilty of an egregious moral wrong, right? If I hit somebody to stop them from hitting you over the head to take your stuff, I'm actually in the right. And it is not just a right for me to defend myself against aggressive violence. I was asked about this on Middle East Eye. They said to me, this was before I got dragged into politics, they said, well, what do you think Malcolm would say about where we are now? And I said, oh, I don't know. I don't like to ventriloquize Malcolm, but I do know how he would have answered the question, do you condemn Hamas? I know how he would answer that one. And the reason is that in the end, the right of occupied people to resist their occupation up to and including armed resistance, that's enshrined in international law. That's actually not a matter of debate. From my standpoint, it is not a right, it is a moral responsibility. I'm not allowed, if somebody comes into my house and tries to harm my beautiful wife or my beautiful children, to say I have the right to resist you, but I'm going to forego that right and let you hurt my folk. And anybody understands that, right? So the Panthers get demonized because they are practicing exactly the same kind of rights of self-defense that are behind stand your ground laws or castle laws. You come up in my crib and I'm going to blow out your back. And Fannie Lou Hamer said, she said, I don't worry about white boys burning a cross on my lawn because I keep a loaded shotgun in every room. And she said, anybody want to burn a cross on my lawn, they ain't never going to write their mama again.
Woo!
So self-defense is not violence.
That's right.
Occupation, land theft, murder, and genocide, those are violence. And anyone that resists those things is morally correct. And anyone that commits those things is morally deficient.
Exactly.
And everyone who tries to explain it and justify it is just as complicit.
100%.
And, yeah, I mean, it's hard to face these systems. And I ran into it this summer visiting Palestine with my daughter, having to explain to her why there's a road that we cannot access. It made no sense to a 7-year-old why there's a segregated road. And I took it for granted. I mean, I've been preconditioned, but some of these systems of oppressions to our children who are not brainwashed.
Yeah.
You get a lot of truth from seeing life through their eyes. When they ask you, why is there no running water on a Tuesday? Why can't I take a bath? Because the Zionists decided that there's no water for the town. And I think a lot of these systematic methods of oppression are things that cut deep into your bones, day in and day out, and it's almost natural that, and a moral imperative, like you were saying, that people have to resist at some point.
And if I can just add, like the first point of resistance is the interior resistance, right? It's actually first expelling the normalizer in your breast. Right? We talk about normalization as this, cardinal sin with respect to the normalization of 48 Palestine. But the reality is that we normalize all manner of day-to-day oppression and injustice and leave it unchecked and unquestioned. And to draw again on the Islamic tradition for this, like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, if you see an injustice, stop it with your hand. If you can't stop it with your hand, then speak against it with your tongue. And if you can't speak against it with your tongue, which literally means you feel fear for your life, it's not that it's going to make things uncomfortable at your job, right? It's that it's a matter of life and death. But if you can't speak against it with your tongue, at least turn your heart against it. And that is the least that can be accepted by a person who calls themselves a person of faith. Well, why do you have to turn your heart against it? You have to turn your heart against oppression, because if you don't, you're slowly accepting it. You are internalizing it. And you become the agent through which the oppression is reproduced, because the resistor inside you is already dead. And this is the reason why, we mentioned the Panthers. The Panthers were outstanding when it came to like the organized resistance. And the Panthers were part of a broader movement to kind of decolonize people's consciousness against accepting and normalizing routinized violence against you. And the reason why our children don't accept this is because they're still more closely connected to their innate human nature. Everybody that's still rooted in their basic childlike humanity understands that whatever our skin color is, or what we might look like, or who we pray with, or who we lay with, we're all people. And people should have, the same access and the opportunities. And that when that doesn't exist, it's a violation of just our basic humanity and dignity. And so we need to listen to the children, because they'll often remind us that there are all of these unseen forms of oppression that our heart has become silent about. And that if we don't take out that tyrant that's already in our breast between our two shoulders, then we got no chance against the tyrant out in the world, because we've reproduced his prison inside our own consciousness.
Thank you. So I want to move us along a little bit to talk about solidarity, international solidarity then and now. And maybe we go back to Malcolm and Martin Luther King Jr. And maybe I'll ask you, how did they understand international solidarity with the Black community? And maybe if you can touch on what was their perspective about Palestine, and what misconceptions exist about what they think or thought.
This is such a tremendous question, and I'm a former baseball player. I was a minor league baseball player, coming up, collegiate athlete. This is a hanging curveball, so I'm gonna try to hit this out the park. Like you spun this one right in there. So the misconceptions about Martin Luther King and Palestinian liberation are so grievous. So I want to provide you guys with some just basic tools for understanding first and foremost. Before we get to Palestine and King, the first thing about King is if anybody tells you that Martin Luther King did nonviolent protest, stop them from talking. Say, shh, be silent, listen. Because Martin Luther King never did a nonviolent protest in his life. Martin Luther King did nonviolent direct action.
Yeah.
He didn't go line up and march where the cops told him to march, which is essentially a parade under police supervision with all of their surveillance devices aimed at you. All of the King's nonviolent interventions were direct action. They were putting the people in between the gears of the machine so the machine couldn't turn over to the next gear. They always had a specific outcome that they were trying to achieve, and the masses of the people were the instrument that was being used to achieve that goal. So the first thing is King is not the fairy tale that they've told you about King, number one. And he had that international view of solidarity, especially later in his life, with respect to the anti-war movement, with respect to resistance to Vietnam, and especially with respect to Palestine. Now, I know at the outset of this current phase of the genocide, a lot of Zionists were trying to claim King. A lot of Zionists were trying to claim King. But what they were trying to conceal from you is that in 1967, before when the Six-Day War happened, King had actually been planning a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Now imagine the most popular Black Baptist preacher in history doing a pilgrimage to the Holy Land at that point in his life. This is, what's the word? Oh man, it is a canon event. Right, in the biography of a religious leader. After the Six-Day War, King canceled that. And he said he would never visit the Holy Land until Israel went back to the 48 borders. He would not sanction a visit to so-called Israel as long as they were still occupying those occupied territories. So there are a lot of misconceptions about King. Like many Black Christians, he was kind of conditioned to a default pro-Zionist position, in the early 50s, the way that many were. But as he was reaching his political maturity, that was gone. And he stood in solidarity with Palestinians from 67 on. So that's number one. Now, Malcolm was at the forefront of articulating the relationship between Black and Palestinian solidarity. In 64, he wrote a piece called Zionist Logic that was after his visit to Gaza. And in his own field notebooks, and there's a wonderful dissertation by my colleague Maitha El-Hassan, she literally was reading Malcolm's handwriting in his field notes from when he went to Khan Yunis. And when Malcolm came back from Khan Yunis, he wrote in his field notes, and you can see it there in his own hands. He said, this is a white Jewish population being empowered by white European imperialists to move brown Arabs off their land. Malcolm understood immediately that Zionism was just a regional variant of white supremacy. The same way that Nazism was just a German variant of white supremacy, he understood this from the beginning. So Malcolm was 10 toes down for Palestine, and it was Malcolm being 10 toes down for Palestine that influenced the great Stokely Carmichael. Stokely Carmichael, later Kwame Ture, started out with SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And after Stokely read what Malcolm had written, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in '64 came out with anti-Zionist politics. And that's essentially what got SNCC blacklisted and broken up. So Kwame Ture then becomes one of these vectors that goes forth with very harsh anti-Zionist critique. And every black radical followed in that King Ture tradition. So James, every single one. And that's why anybody that doesn't understand black and Palestinian solidarity does not understand black history. And I'll just tell you that right from the beginning. Because James Baldwin, 1979, open letter to the born again, he said the state of Israel was not created for the salvation of the Jews. The state of Israel was created for the salvation of Western interests.
Exactly.
Right? And once you read Zionism as the Middle Eastern regional variant of European imperialism and white supremacy, the whole thing makes sense. And it never makes any sense without that. So then you understand that any struggle against white supremacy is a struggle for liberation of black people. It is a struggle for indigenous liberation. And before I forget, let's not pretend like our Mexican American brothers and sisters are not indigenous peoples. 93% of the Mexican American population is of indigenous ancestry. So when they start talking about people being illegal immigrants, child, please, we from here. That's not a thing. And the people that are indigenous to this place, especially the southwestern portions of the United States, these are places that were literally part of Mexico not that long ago. They ain't crossed the border crossed them.
That's right.
And if we fast forward a little to the last decade, when the Ferguson protest movement took place, there was a beautiful moment of solidarity when Palestinians in Gaza were rising in protest and sending communications of how to deal with the tear gas, how to deal with the brutality of the police. They were able to see the parallels quite fast, and maybe you can talk a little bit.
I'll never forget Mark Lamont Hill actually, talking about this. He was like, I was getting messages in real time saying, stand as close as you can to the police, get them downwind of you, then they can't use the tear gas because it blows right onto them. People were getting real time text advice on how to take care of them pigs, because let's be honest, it's the same police state. It's the same corporations that are building the private prisons, that are building the checkpoints, that are building the border wall. And like we used to say, same pig, different pen. And a lot of times now, especially in the past 20 years, the IDF has these special training relationships with a bunch of different law enforcement agencies, so that quite literally, IDF, IOF tactics are being deployed by police. Now, this is something I just want to make a quick moment to correct. The police are not racist and brutal in the United States because they're trained by the IDF. The police were racist and brutal in the United States of America before there ever was an IDF. It's because these are it's like a funhouse mirror of white supremacy. They're seeing themselves, and before it was Israel, before it was the Zionists, it was South Africa. South Africa was the laboratory for a bunch of violent policing experiments. There has always been and before that, we'll bring it back to California. Augustin Vollmer, the first police chief commissioner in Berkeley, California, was somebody that had served in U.S. occupation forces in the Philippines, putting down Filipino nationalist movements. And he brought back to the Berkeley PD counterinsurgency tactics, and that's what was used against black communities in the Bay Area.
Shame.
And that's what the great Frantz Fanon and his teacher, Aimé Césaire, another Caribbean intellectual, called the imperial boomerang, which is that whatever the empire does to people abroad, it's coming soon to a block near you.
That's right.
It's going to boomerang right back to you. Aimé Césaire said that fascism was just Europeans doing to one another what they had done to the colonial world all along.
That's right.
So all of these revolutionary thinkers understood that if you do not fight against oppression in Palestine, if you do not see the connection, if you don't build that international solidarity, the way that the Panthers built international solidarity with resistance movements, the way that Fanon, a black Caribbean intellectual, ends up serving in the Algerian liberation movement, and then also ambassador of Algeria to newly independent sub-Saharan African nations, right? This incredible global South resistance circuit. If you don't see the interconnectedness, then you actually can't get free, because your domestic liberation is intimately connected to American imperialism abroad. And so you have to fight it on both fronts. You have to fight it on the external front and on the internal front, because they're closely connected. That's what made Malcolm so dangerous. That's what made King so dangerous. That's what made the Panthers so dangerous, is that they were ushering in an era of collective liberation. And it is our job now, in 2025, to finish the task.
Yeah. Woo!
Yes.
That's a good segue to the question I wanted to ask you next, where we see in the Palestine solidarity movement, through the genocide, there's a wide array and collection of different communities that have risen in solidarity. We saw a very strong movement with the LGBTQ community, the black community, indigenous, and many others.
Yep.
I don't want to, Irish. Yeah, thank you. And I think we can easily see that many of them are seeing themselves in some of what's happening in Palestine. But also there's an argument to be made that the movements we've had, like Black Lives Matters, what happened in Ferguson, and so on and so forth, helped us move collectively together towards that more international awareness.
Yes.
So how can we benefit from this, and how can we build on it to be able to show up for each other, to fight the powers that be and push back as a collective, as opposed to staying in our lane?
And,
how can we get out of our lane? Because we have to do that.
This is the fundamental question that I have been preoccupied with since the day that, and you know, Jason called, my campaign manager, and was also Dr. Jill Stein's campaign manager. Give a round of applause for Jason. Early August of last year, they got on a Zoom, and it was after I had done an IG Live with Dr. Jill 24 hours earlier. They asked me 24 hours later whether I would consider running as the VP. I had known them for all of a day. And I had to consider it. And the reason why I'm citing that now is that I went back to all of those revolutionary heroes that I had, and here was my fundamental diagnosis of the situation, and this is the reason why I made the decision to intervene in the electoral political sphere. It's related to this, so stay with me. The great Kwame Ture said, revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues. Revolutionaries organize against systems. Revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues, revolutionaries organize against systems. See, what happened in 2020 is you saw the most effective mass mobilization against police brutality that any of us had ever seen, and this was to defend the dignity of black life. George Floyd had been choked out over 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I still have not watched that video. I couldn't make it past second 30, right? The whole world rose up. Palestine, murals, marches in Paris. And for the first time in my life, more white folks than black folks at anti-police brutality protests, right? Mm-hmm. The biggest mobilization that any of us had ever seen, but it was a mobilization around the issue. not an organization against the system that was producing the outcome. So Team Blue takes charge and police kill more people in every subsequent year. They've broken a record every single year since 2020. Cops have killed more people. And just understand that in the United States of America, 1 in 3 stranger homicides is when a cop kills a civilian. 1 in 3 stranger homicides is when a cop kills a civilian. So fast forward now to 2023. For me, 2021 is when I started the hashtag Zionism is white supremacy, because it was the May bombing of Gaza. At that time, I just started talking to people about what Malcolm had said. And we saw, mobilization at that point in time, and none of us have ever seen anything like the mobilization for Palestinian liberation that we've seen since October 2023. Right?
Yeah.
If you're Palestinian, you never saw so many non-Palestinian folk coming out and shouting free Palestine from the river to the sea, correct? It's the same experience as me. I'm like, who are all these people? And why are they like, this used to be an us thing, and thank God they're here, right?
Yeah.
Mass mobilization around the issue. But we're still 2 years in, and they're still doing it.
Yeah.
Because the mobilization around the issue does not produce the result. Organization against the system produces the result. We've seen abolish ICE marches, people out to protect immigrant rights and immigrant communities. Again, mass displays of solidarity, mobilization around the issue. Where is the political organization that is channeling people's energy from mobilization around the siloed issues to organization against the system that produces each of these interrelated forms of oppression?
Exactly.
It's not a rhetorical question. I asked y'all, where is the organization? Present.
Right here.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what we're here to do.
Exactly.
Because Malcolm said we're not, and Malcolm was a teacher directly to Stokely Carmichael, to Kwame Ture. Malcolm said we're not outnumbered, we're out-organized.
Exactly.
We're not outnumbered, we're out-organized. And what I would add to what Malcolm and to what Kwame Ture said, and what I did want to add, and it's the reason why I'm running, I won't talk too much about the campaign for governor, I know it's a 501c3 event, but this is just a factual response to a question. The reason why I'm running for elected office is that we need a political party that will help channel the people's energy from mobilization around specific issues to organization against the system. Kwame Ture said, voting every 4 years is the most bourgeois hypocrisy, but I know that the vote is a way that I can organize my people. Malcolm said in '64, the Ballad of the Bullet, we're going to knock on every door in Harlem, and we're going to register every black face behind every black door, not as a Democrat, not as a Republican, but as an independent. And if whoever's behind that door does not have enough responsibility to get themselves registered, then we're going to run them out of town on a rail. Because Malcolm understood that a revolutionary does not leave any arrows in the quiver. It's not that electoral politics by itself will solve the problem. It won't. Mutual aid, direct action, and electoral politics is the cocktail that Malcolm was mixing. It's the cocktail that Kwame Ture was mixing. It's the cocktail that the Black Panthers were mixing. And that's exactly the formula that we're trying to deploy. That's the reason why we were out doing mutual aid yesterday and food prep this morning, and also are running for elected office, because in the end, we have to actually create a political organization that will contest for power, because you cannot shame these people into stopping their genocides.
That's right.
Kwame Ture said, the problem with nonviolent protest is that it requires your enemy to have a conscience, and America has
They
none.
don't. That's right.
If you cannot make a moral appeal to these people, if they had morals, they would not be oppressors.
That's right.
So you have to organize to contest for power. And organizing against the systems requires political power, and it requires people power.
Woo!
I think you've hit a couple of really good points that also resonate from the Palestinian perspective. I think I look back at the history of the Palestine Liberation Organization and the smaller factions that were inside of it. When they started organizing, the first thing they did was to try to care for the community.
Come on.
They started to help people stand up and be able to run their lives and provide them the support, knowing that if you have a community around you that cares, that if you're not leaving anybody behind, it means when the moment is there that you want to resist, that community is gonna be ready
Yeah.
for you. It's gonna embrace you and help you stay in the fight. And that's what we see today in Gaza.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. We're almost coming up on 2 years. We still see people not giving up on their fight, and they're still very clear on who cares for them
That's
and
right.
who's the oppressor.
Yeah.
And I think this was the case for the black resistance movements,
Yep.
like the Black Panther. Is they started by caring for the community, and it's good that you're highlighting some of those mutual aid efforts and these activities. But maybe we can go a little bit more to talk about the importance of caring for the community and building support in the everyday life of people.
It's so important. So in my online revolutionary book club, so this is not a campaign thing, so I'm going to promote this. But we have something called Revolutionary Learning Community, and you can find it on my link tree on social media. And we'll do like online courses and intensives that like root our resistance in like a sound understanding of Black liberation. So one of the things that we read was Huey P. Newton's Revolutionary Suicide. And in Revolutionary Suicide, towards the end of the book, Huey says that everybody was struck by the image of armed Black men. But in the Black Panther Party's 10-point platform, self-defense didn't come till number 7. The first 6 points were what we called survival programs. They were about hot breakfast. They were about education. They were about medical care. The Panthers operated 23, if I'm not mistaken, free medical clinics throughout the United States of America, free clinics. We're still talking about getting, universal health care because the Democrats keep standing in the way of it.
That's right.
The Panthers said if the government ain't gonna do it, we gonna do it.
That's right.
Right? I, growing up in poverty in DC, like literally never living at the same street address for a calendar year consecutively until I was 9. In and out of public housing, in and out of shelters. I got hot breakfast every day before school as part of the DC program, a federal program. The only reason why that federal program existed is because the Panthers did it first.
That's right.
And people were so concerned about the Panthers attracting young people that they put those hot breakfast programs into the public school program. So it begins with meeting the people's needs and serving the community. And that's the way that you build community strength. That's the way that you build the people power, and that's the way that you build the solidarity. And what I've tried to explain to folks in my own political work is that our goal is not to say to people that are doing the mutual aid and the care and the liberation work on the ground, hey, I've got this great platform that deals with all of your issues, you should vote for us. My approach is to show up in service to the people that are doing the work on the ground and use political party organizing as a way to get the spotlight and additional resources and a megaphone on the people that are doing the work on the ground. Because for me, if you show up and try to sap the people's power for your own electoral purposes, that's an instrumentalist colonial relationship. But if you show up to try to put the resources of a political party in service of the people, that's how you extend the model of the Panthers. And every one of my political aspirations is rooted in fulfilling the mission that the Panthers set out to start. By the way, quick point on that. I haven't checked out yet if this is legit, but I got a late night DM from National Brown Berets, and they put this also on an Instagram post I made. They were like, the National Brown Berets never endorse any political candidates, but we are happy to endorse Butch, Ware. And like when you get an endorsement from the Brown Berets, like you might as well be getting me like a straight Huey P. Newton endorsement. Like I'm taking that as a Panther endorsement. I don't care what y'all say. Yeah, so it all begins with the mutual aid. It all begins with actually being rooted in that revolutionary love that we spoke about before. And that's something that is either in you or it ain't in you. You cannot fake that. And our corporate-owned politics that produces the genocide, our corporate-owned politics that produces the carcerality and the police brutality and the private prison complex, they're hard-hearted, they're dead inside. They cannot show up in service to people because it just ain't in them.
That's right. That's right.
We're coming up on the hour, so we're gonna start to do some wrap up.
I'll try to be less long-winded in my answers, but remember, I'm a history professor. So.
We like your answer.
It's been great. It's been great. I want to go double click again on the resistance is an act of love.
Come on.
It's and you brought it up in many different ways so far, and it's such a good point to remember why people do it when they want to care for their children, they want to care for their own families who are being oppressed day in and day out by the system, and they want to feel the freedom that's not afforded to them, that the system is siphoning off to other groups. Mm-hmm. And it's baffling sometimes that we ourselves even sometimes forget about that point within the oppressed community, and we buy into the propaganda that comes our way. So my question to you is, how can we help our own communities embrace the idea that resistance is love, and it's not violence for the sake of violence. It's serving the bigger purpose of what you said in the beginning of reaching deep into our own humanity.
Yeah. The first thing that hits my heart is, again, Fanon, because ultimately we are incapable of the kind of radical self-love that is needed because we have internalized the hatred that our oppressors have thrown at us for centuries. It has become a part of us. It is part of our wiring. And one of the great West African Muslim scholars, himself a community leader, Sheikh Ibrahim Yas, there's this verse of the Quran that says, "We created you in different tongues and colors so that you would know one another." And in his commentary on the Quran, he said that what is implied by the verb to know in this verse is to love. We created you in different tongues and colors so that you would love one another. And then he asked this rhetorical question. He said, can a people that hates itself love others?
Wow.
And then he asked another rhetorical question. Can a people that doesn't know its own history love itself? So we have been alienated from our histories and from our sacred stories and from our sacred songs, so that we would be deficient in love for ourselves, so that we would be incapable of meeting in that symphony of universal love. So the beginning is to relearn our humanity, to relearn our songs, to relearn our dances. And this is one place, you guys must know from hearing how much I love the Panthers, but this was one nitpicky point that I had with the Panthers, is that the Panthers, because of their beef with the US organization, which were cultural nationalists, very Afrocentric in their approach, and they played nice with the feds, which is trash, and so the Panthers should, be upset with them. But the Panthers accepted a framing that was like, well, do we go for a revolutionary culture or a cultural revolution? And they were like, no, we're about revolutionary culture. And I'm like, nah, man, it's both. You need a revolution that sends you back to your ancestral sources, because that's how you learn to heal from the inner trauma that colonialism has inflicted upon you. That's how you relearn to love. And one of my favorite academic books, written by my colleague Jason Young at the University of Michigan when I was there, is a book called Rituals of Resistance. This takes us back to where we started. And he talked about how enslaved West Africans from the Congo, West Central Africans in South Carolina and Georgia, would root themselves in their ritual traditions despite the fact that they were 5,000 miles away from home. And his argument was that there is no more radical form of resistance to systems of capitalism and imperialism that would commoditize you and dehumanize you than to root yourselves in the sacred traditions that made you into people for thousands of years before Columbus ever sailed. For thousands of years before white supremacy was ever a thing. Because our traditions made us into people over millennia, over eons, and getting back to those sacred sources of our humanity is how we learn to love again. How we learn to love in a way that's not a sycophantic imitation of our colonizers.
Yes.
But that is rooted in like deep love and knowledge of our own cultures, which then, when you're deeply rooted and you know who you are, you have no compunction whatsoever about accepting that which comes from other tongues and other colors. Because you now know this is just like this thing that we have, or this teaches me a lesson that finishes a lesson that I learned. And that's what's meant by being made in different tongues and colors, so that you would know one another, so that you would love one another. And that can't happen unless and until the healing in our internal selves is undertaken. And that's why the one thing that you always get from me is that struggle against the tyrant, the pharaoh, the Nimrod, the oppressor, the Caesar inside your own heart and inside your own head if you want to be part of this struggle out in the world. Because if you're not doing that inner work, then you are bringing the enemy right with you. And a lot of people do not want to do the work on their own egos in this movement. They do not want to unpack a lot of their own trauma before they show up into the space. And so if you ever see me moving like that, check my black ass. Like, honest to God, like, we have to be willing to hold one another accountable and to show up as our best selves and to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to heal from the harms of empire, because we will not create movements of solidarity and love on Freedom Day.
Yeah.
We have to be building them through our resistance. If we wait till Freedom Day, it's too late. If we wait till Freedom Day, it's too late. We have to be building those communities of love and of care, and of, mutual solidarity with all different kind of people through our revolutionary practice.
So I think this is a perfect way to end my questions. Thank you so much. I want to save some time for the audience to be able to ask their questions. It's been a real pleasure to have this conversation with you, and I look forward to more questions from the audience. And let's get around and let's go question back there first.
Well, I have more than a question for you. So me and Nicole are with the SEIU union.
Oh yeah, word. Okay, welcome in. Come on now.
Right over here.
Yeah.
We were just at the protest these past few days at Center.
Yep.
So last year was my first time attending our leadership assembly in San Diego, and we were pretty much being told to campaign for Kamala Harris.
Sorry, I just threw up a little in my mouth.
Oh, you did too.
Yeah, and so I confronted Dave Reagan about this at the event. We had words, and ever since I've been trying to get him to get the union to be more Green Party oriented, or at least include more candidates from the Green Party.
Yep.
They absolutely appreciated that.
Shame.
And this time around, he wouldn't even make eye contact with me, and any room I walked into, he just jetted out of. And so I want to know how I can get our union to be more inclusive. And I saw they didn't let you debate either.
Well, so SEIU Local 1000 did let us debate. And so this is how I would counsel you to take action. And this allows me to tell a story again with respect to my 501c3 host. I was asked a question, so I'm going to answer it. So the very first open candidate forum in the state was the SEIU Local 1000 in Sacramento 2 weeks ago. So they did invite me to participate, and there were 7 Democrats on that stage. It was 2 rounds of questions, about 2 hours each, with a little bit of a break in between. When that was finished, they closed the door to a members-only vote. We had people in the room. They said that I won best candidate, hands down, flat out, first round of ballot. Also one candidate that they want to hear more from in the future. So the rank and file, and this was a debate that was streamed to the SEIU locals, a number of them throughout the state, but not all of them. So unfortunately, they recorded the whole thing, but they asked no one to record and to put it out in the public. And I think that the reason for that is that the leadership wants plausible deniability on what actually happened in the room, because we won the rank and file outright in one shot. In one shot. And so we did an organizing meeting online with some rank and file of SEIU. And so what I'm gonna call you into action on is that we've asked the rank and file, not just of SEIU, but of anybody that has union membership, to write to your union leadership to whatever candidate forums you have upcoming, that they not freeze me out. Now, why am I in the South Bay in the first place? Because on Monday, I'm gonna be participating in the next large open candidate forum. So there have only been 2 full candidate forums so far, and they haven't been able to freeze me out of any. They froze me out of the Politico one. They literally changed the name of it from a candidate forum to a policy discussion because they didn't want to have to find a way to justify, yeah, exactly.
We were there.
Well, we're both chief stewards, and we want to know how we can bridge that gap, because Jonathan Liebman and Gustavo, Dave Reagan absolutely refused to listen to me.
So what I would say is rally the rank and file, and we actually, my campaign manager put a letter template together for rank and file members to write their union leadership. And if you're part of another union, and I'll also just mention this, I've been contacted by the California Faculty Association about applying right away for endorsement, and other union groups. If we can get, because let's just be honest about this, the way that I closed that gathering was by quoting Malcolm. Malcolm said about the Democrats in '64, you put them first and they put you last.
That's right.
And that makes you a chump. That makes you a political chump. And I said to SEIU, ain't y'all tired of being chumped?
Woo!
Because y'all gave a lip. But the thing is that the rank and file is. So if rank and file people make enough noise, then it puts a tremendous amount of pressure. And we have heard back, I won't mention names, but we have heard back that SEIU leadership is very serious about considering us for endorsement because they have to. They've heard from the rank and file. Yeah, they have to. Thank you for that question.
Question in the front here. Donna.
It's more of a comment. So I want to really appreciate you for your comment about struggling against the system and not the issues, because that's what we really have to organize against, this fucking system that we live under, all aspects of it. And then I also wanted to say Hamas, and for those of you who don't know, Hamas translates into Islamic Resistance Movement. That's what Hamas means, all right? And in the 1980s, when Hamas was being built, I used to live in occupied Palestine, and on Saturdays I would go to Gaza with Workers' Hotline. And Hamas movement, along with other Palestinian organizations, was providing tents for the people who their houses were destroyed by the Israeli army, who was then occupying inside Gaza. And they were providing also kindergartens for the children. They were providing for the people's needs. And the Hamas movement did not get corrupted like the PLO did. And so in the election of 2006, the Palestinians all throughout the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza voted for Hamas. So they were democratically elected, and people who observed the election said this was the most democratic election that they had observed.
Yeah. And thank you for that, history lesson. And I'll just say, I was at an event that was organized by some just wonderful, brilliant, open-hearted students at College of Sequoia a couple months ago. and they zoomed in a brother from Congo. They zoomed in several people from Gaza to address the crowd, and they allowed us to ask questions. So one person asked a question of a brother that was in Gaza at the time. He said, "What do you say to people that that say that they support Palestinian liberation but don't support the resistance?" And the brother, without any hesitation, responded. He said, "Anyone who does not support the resistance does not support Palestinian liberation."
That's right.
And then he said, and anyone that condemns the resistance is an enemy to the people.
That's right. That's right.
That's it.
And it's, I'll expand on this a little bit. I think there's a strong attempt to reframe the struggle, if you want to call it that, as a fight between Muslims and Jews.
Right.
And try to rob the long history and tradition of Palestinian resistance that came from all parts of the Palestinian community. And I grew up in a family of mixed Christian and Muslim faith, and I've experienced both ends of the spectrum. And not that they are different in Palestine. We live together. We lived as one. And I was spoiled to be able to celebrate all the religious holidays, and most of the other kids did not. But I think what was always true about those movements in the very beginning is they cared for the community, and that's what I was trying to emphasize earlier. And that's true for the ones that were in power or more popular before Hamas became more dominant. But all of them started by being able to uplift their communities and care for them. And there were many leaders of the resistance who were Christian in the old days. George Habash was one of the very prominent leaders of the Palestinian resistance, and he's a Christian from the town of Lid. So I think right now there's a lot of attempts to silence and create a boogeyman out of the word Hamas. And
The kids aren't falling for it.
and
No, the kids not falling
but
for it.
yes, thankfully that's now we're moving past it. We're able to have the clarity, and that's why it's important for all of us to be able to push back and speak the truth that we believe everyone else needs to hear. We cannot be intimidated into, yes, we're just going to condemn just to stay on stage. We have to be able to say it and be brave enough to tell the system that your lies are lies and they're meant to silence, and it's not actual honest debate.
Yes.
And refuse to debate with those who are just bad faith actors.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
And I think everybody in this room knows how damaging pinkwashing has been for this movement, and that they've used the idea that the essentially Islamophobic idea that somehow LGBTQ rights can't be incorporated into this movement. So how do we make sure we get that message across, especially to the trans community who are really under fire now, and their lives, the trans community are really the canary in the coal mine for this, because their rights, state by state, their lives are being put in danger. How do we make sure they feel part of this movement?
The first part to the answer to this question is that it's not liberation if people are left out of it. It's not liberation if people are left out of it. And that in the end, every single human being is meant to be shielded from discrimination, from oppression, and from, especially, and this is the part that's insidious, violence.
Yeah.
Because right now, in the rhetoric against the trans community, it is literally costing people their lives on a nightly basis. It's normalizing demonization of a group of people that makes their lives expendable. in public sight. And I think that it's absolutely critical that we push back on the pink washing, but it's absolutely also critical that we make it clear that collective liberation leaves none of our siblings behind. Period, full stop. That every single oppressed community has to be included in our vision of liberation, or it ain't liberation. It's just a different form of oppression. And that's what I meant to allude to when I said earlier, it is not mercy amongst your own, but it is mercy in general, it is mercy in general, it is mercy in general. Because if the mercy and compassion is only extended to people that you think of as being like you, then you are complicit in that moment in oppression. You have become a tool for reproducing it. So we have to scream that, we have to put both hands over our mouth, stand at the highest place we can, and say, we're not going to let our trans siblings be excluded from our vision of collective liberation and movement.
Question in the back here. Next to it.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you so much for putting on this event. I've listened to a lot of your words, and I definitely put you in the likeness of Malcolm X and all these other really powerful revolutionaries. My question is...
Somebody get her $100 that I promised her. I'm just playing.
Yeah.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Everyone else as well. This is a great space. My question is more personal in a sense that my husband is currently in Gaza, and I've been dealing with the immigration system, and we've seen it with they're splitting families apart, and they're not allowing for my family reunification. We talk a lot about dealing with it in the political sense, and it's also very personal, not being able to have food and things like that. So, a lot of my thoughts recently have been about how do we break the siege? We know that there's the flotilla that's going, but here domestically, we all can't just jump on a boat and go. Well, we can. I would love to do that. I'm just trying to get in on that, but really, I'm asking. It's very political. I'm asking the congressman to write these letters, and of course, he did write a letter to the embassy saying oh yeah, we should schedule the interview. But of course, in his letter, he had to say something about Hamas. And at first, I just took it because I was okay, maybe my case is gonna go somewhere, but it's still been stuck. So I feel I even tried to talk to Gavin Newsom, but he's a state person, it's a federal issue. When I'm directly dealing with the system and trying to, for my own sake, make some progress, I talked with some political organizers, and they said it's not so much a media issue rather than a lawyer and a political one, so they didn't really want to put a story or anything.
What?
So I don't know, I wonder if you have any words of advice or the idea of breaking the siege and building these connections on an interpersonal way or anything. Yeah, thank you.
So before I say anything in response to the question, I'm just so sorry. I'm sorry that you're having to deal with the uncertainty. I'm sorry that you're having to deal with, being deprived of your spouse. And it just saddens me. Whoever told you, that it's not something that we can make noise about is trying to silence you. And I think that there's a couple of different levels to the way in which even just the people in this room can help. So when I was at Columbus Park yesterday, I was speaking to a trans sister who was talking about getting booted out of care and ending up back on the streets after getting moved into a bed bug ridden facility and now finding herself back on the street. And I said, can I use my social media platform? Can I use my megaphone to shout at these people? Can I get on a high place and put my hands over my mouth and tell your story? And she said, absolutely, do it. So I started to do that literally with the reel yesterday. Every last one of us has a responsibility to raise up all of the stories of the people who are individually harmed. That's why your question was so important and so touching to me, because part of the dehumanization of Zionism is that Zionists get names.
Yes,
Palestinians get numbers,
yeah. Yeah.
right? Zionists get stories. Palestinians get data entry points. And so our stories, the reason why the colonizers fight over history is narrative. And my favorite MC said narrative scripts human behavior the way that code scripts computers. We have to tell our story. So you have if you give me permission, I will get out and put a megaphone in front of your case and anybody else who's being harmed. That's the job.
Yeah.
That's the job of leadership. The job of leadership is not to say, I don't want the smoke. The job of leadership is to say, give me the smoke. Let me stand up and shout to draw attention to your case. Because of course you're gonna get better legal support if there's visibility on the case. Of course, if I contact my people in care, you're gonna get more attention on the case. They're just trying to silence you.
Yeah.
And every last one of you who has an individualized, personalized story of the way that this oppression harms you, tell your story. Do not let them silence you.
Yeah.
That's number one. So with your permission, I will fight on your behalf. And then this leads us to the second part. And the second part is harder, but it's the reason why we're here. So I told, it wasn't a lie, but I just stretched the truth slightly. Kwame Ture never said revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues, revolutionaries organize against systems. I said that, synthesizing what Kwame Ture said in a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different times. That's my summary of his argument, okay?
Woo!
And what he actually said was he said it's easy to get people to mobilize around issues because our innate sense of injustice is triggered. So-and-so was kicked out of her job unfairly, let's rally. So-and-so was evicted unfairly, let's throw a rent party. The individual stories are the thing that galvanize people to mobilize. Because when people hear your story, they're gonna relate and they're gonna wanna take immediate action. And that helps get people moving. But we have to channel that from mobilization around the issue to organization against the system that produces it. And that's more difficult because there is no immediate emotional gratification in it. It's hard work. You don't see the results of it. You have to sit in community and you have to fundraise and you have to get volunteers and you have to have a vision that is about amassing political power. And that organization is more than just the sum of our individual stories of struggling against the system. It is actually a story that has not yet been told. We will write that story by the threading together of each of our individual confrontations. Kiana's confrontation with the state, your confrontation with the state, my confrontation with the state, and we will build, and this is the part that we've got to have the audacity and the vision to understand. The revolutionary movement that we are building will be rooted in the dreams and the visions and the prayers of our ancestors, and it will be watered with the words of Malcolm, and it will be nourished with the blood of martyrs from Rafat to Fred Hampton. But it will not be exactly what any of them did. We will make a new liberation. It will be rooted in the lessons from those pasts, but we are going to tell a new story. We are going to make a new story. We are going to write a new story together with yours and with mine. And it's only through the struggle to build an organizational structure that is capable of tearing down capitalism, that's capable of tearing down imperialism, that you will ever be free, or I will ever be free.
Woo!
More questions? There was one in the back before still. No? No? Yeah, go for it.
You guys can swap mics. Oh yeah, that was just handed back. Yeah, that works.
Hi, so I'm Filipino American and I don't know much about like my culture and stuff, and you're saying like go like learn about your culture and stuff, and I've been thinking about like doing all that stuff. However, like I have a bunch of siblings too, and I also want them to know about it, so then we're all like learning together. But I don't really know how I would go about it without like trying to force them into it, because like the last thing I want for my siblings is like, oh, like you need to do this. Like I don't want to be like a nagging mother.
Yep. Yeah. So this is an excellent question, and you guys will pardon me, but when I'm with family, I just process things, the way that I would process them at home, and that's often through the lens of my faith. So in the Quran, there's this verse that always preoccupies me. Never did we send a messenger except in the language of their people. Never did we send a messenger except in the language of their people. So the way that we need to make the appeal is in the language and the culture of the time. And it's the reason why even though I read a lot of books, I don't like hitting people over the head with books. I like to try to put the language and the arguments that, like what I did with the Kwame Ture thing. He has a couple of like lengthy discourses on mobilization and organization, but I want to crystallize it down into a core teaching so that it's more accessible. So find the language with your own siblings and with your own community where you can get people to engage with the past and with the political stakes of the present in a way that's like enjoyable. The thing about the Panthers is that the Panthers made political education fun. The Panthers made political education come with hot breakfast, and it came with coloring books, and it came with telling the story in a way that would reach people's hearts. So you know your folk better than I know your folk. You know your family and your siblings better. Educate yourself, make yourself a vector, and then empower yourself as a teacher. Not just to quote what was said in other books. Become your own book, right? Figure out the way that you're going to talk about your community's past and your family's past, and always rooted in your own story. There's a reason why I started this discourse with me telling you about my engagement with Malcolm. Because everything else that I tell you makes sense when you know about what Islam means to me and how it came to me, what Black liberation means to me and how it came to me. Root yourself in your own family story, uncover that story. Root yourself in the story of this community. One of my students at UCSB, Sophia Yu, she wrote her paper for my Black Revolutionaries class on the way that Asian American identity was literally founded in the Bay Area, predominantly in response to the rise of the Panthers. Asian American as a category was not a thing before the 1960s. And it was a bunch of Asian American activists who were deeply inspired and connected to Panthers in the Bay that started to take the most politically aggressive version of creating a kind of pan-Asian American identity. That's a beautiful revolutionary solidarity story.
Yeah.
Right? And until we research those stories and make those stories come closer to home, they're going to be out there in the ether. But you can make it relevant to your family and your people and your community. So you become the teacher, dig into those stories, and then tell a good story to your siblings. Yeah, I see Umar jumping in.
I actually wanted to say something about that. You're talking about Filipinos. So it was interesting. I had a friend. She was telling me something about Philippines. I mean, like I grew up with Filipinos in Saki. Like, I'm very familiar with the culture and like parts of the history, but I didn't really like. So adding to what Brother Butch was saying, like, what like made me so more interested in like what more connected to the Philippine history is she mentioned like Lapu-Lapu was like basically he was Lapu-Lapu. It's like a famous dish, and he's also on the currency on the Philippines currency, and she mentioned like he was one of the resistance fighters who fought the Spanish.
That's
and, like,
right.
And then like also there was a mention to him being Muslim, so I was like, oh cool. So that made me really interested because I'm Muslim, and so I read more into it, and so like basically what I'm saying is here like what Brother Butch was saying is like if you can find something that like interests them and then tie it back to the history, then they'll just want to learn more about it.
Yeah, and that's an excellent practical example, and I love that because it takes us back full circle to where we started, right? And I'll like, it's not just because I'm a history professor that I say this, although it is kind of because I'm a history professor that I say this, but I'll go to Malcolm again for this. Malcolm said, of all of our fields of study, history is most likely to reward our research. And the reason is that it allows us to find a narrative thread in our collective past that was concealed from us, that is a fundamental part of who we are. So that when we're fighting our enemy in the moment, we realize that we're only here to fight our enemy in the moment because our ancestors survived a previous encounter. And that they did this that worked. Let me try the version of it that would work today. They tried this that didn't. Let me steer clear of that, right? That ultimately, in learning from the past, we have this incredibly powerful tool, but that past has to be made alive again. It can't be something that's dusty and old in storybooks. It has to be something that people can use and live today. And the last thing that I would say with that is also, again, back a reference to the Quran. The Quran also makes this same argument about the role of history. It's in the 11th chapter, 120th verse, it's Surah Hud. It says, all that we relate to you in the histories of the previous prophets, with it we fortify your heart. Now, the heart is in every system of ancient knowledge except for the European post-Enlightenment tradition. The heart is the center of not just emotion and feeling, it's the center of intellection and understanding. It's that in ancient Native American philosophy, ancient Egyptian philosophy, ancient Islamic philosophy. So there's no head-heart divide. The thinking and the feeling and the spiritual inspiration all takes place inside your breast. So what does it mean to fortify your heart with history? It means that you learn stories and narratives and new knowledge. But it also means you open yourself up to the emotional motivation, the encouragement, the spiritual insight. That's what comes from a real understanding of our individual past, our own specific ancestral histories, but especially our collective history as humanity. Because whatever Filipino resistance fighters used to get free from the Spanish, if it's working, I need some of that too. If it's working, I need some of that too. Whatever the Irish were using to get an English boot off of their neck, I need some of that too. If it's resistance history, that's my history. I'm claiming it, right? And there's a lesson to be drawn from it. And so, yes, root yourself in the stories that are closest to you. But once you're rooted in those, it allows you to reach out and learn from every place. Yeah, I saw your hand up, and I saw your hand first. So, and I think he's holding the mic. Yeah,
you first?
Yeah, go first.
Okay. I would like to do a bit of contrarian.
Please do.
So, the reason I was interested in this talk was how can we build stronger solidarity, right? I actually came across a paper by Christian Davis Bailey from 2015,
Okay.
The Black Palestinian Solidarity in the Ferguson-Gaza era.
Yep.
And, he talked about, this is 1 year after Michael Brown
Yep.
got killed, right? And so, I'll read a quote from here. So he talks about, within liberal and mainstream Black and Palestinian American circles, the question of solidarity has been more fraught. From the mainstream civil rights organizations and leaders of the 1960s to today's Congressional Black Caucus, this is 2015, this is today.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
And the liberal political class has largely supported or remained ambivalent about Zionist policies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then he goes on that, the Ferguson-Gaza movement has marked an increase in mainstream U.S. political awareness and momentum shift for both Black and Palestinian liberation struggles.
Yep.
This is written 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the people he just talked about in that previous paragraph, I think they've doubled down.
Yeah.
We see the Bernie Sanders, we see the
Yeah.
Squad, we see all these things.
Lib-
Kings Day, 50501.
Libs are gonna live.
We
Yeah.
can't bring this issue here.
Yeah.
So he wrote this 10 years ago.
Yeah, man.
So what do we need to do?
That's such a beautiful question, and thank you for that. In this audience, I'm going to say this. Kwame Ture said that, of course, when the final confrontation arises, the liberal will be on the side of the oppressor.
That's right. That's right.
Malcolm said the liberal is a fox. It bares its teeth, and you think that it's smiling at you, but you are on the menu.
Yeah.
The conservative is a wolf. When it bares its teeth, it's into a vicious snarl that leaves the Negro with no illusion as to where he stands. Malcolm said in 1964, he said, the white liberal is the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere.
Yep.
And he said that at a time that white conservatives were hanging black people from trees. White conservatives were turning dogs and fire hoses on protesters, and white conservatives were putting bullets in the heads of white voting rights activists and burying them in shallow graves alongside Mississippi roads.
Yep.
But Malcolm said what he said, and he was not wrong.
That's right.
The co-optation of the black political class by the liberal establishment is something that cannot be reasoned with. It must be destroyed. Because they serve the exact same function that the native administration and the African chiefs played in a colonial administration in Africa.
Yeah.
They are the black face of white supremacy.
Yeah. Yep.
And we have to understand that people like Kamala Harris and people like Barack Obama, these are black imperialists, and we must fight them with every last thing that's inside of us, because they are ops. They are betrayers, and there is no reasoning with people that will sell us all into bondage for their position in the empire.
It's so nefarious because they have this facade of being moral, as you were talking about. And this, I think, makes it harder for us to bring others along because we have this misleadership.
Yeah, and we have to be very clear that we make no differentiation between blue genociders and red genociders. You know, and by the way, this is I've seen it happen a number of times. It's actually a very liberating thing for recovering liberals when they finally see it. It is. It is. You just, and the way that it starts is that you just remind them of the things that they think that liberalism is about, right? And then you start to show for them the way that the current Democrat Party is so far to the right of Ronald Reagan that you can't even see Reagan from where Kamala Harris is standing.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And once that happens, then they start to ask questions. And so the reason why I said I'm going to say this in the environment, because I was going to go real hard banging on libs, but what I'm trying to do in electoral politics is to not bang on the libs and dunk on them, but to point out the contradictions and the hypocrisy to the ordinary folk on what the misleadership class, as you described it, is actually doing. Because that's how you unplug them from the matrix. It's not saying you're a dumb lib, you know, that doesn't help, right? But instead you find them where they are and just show them that even if I believed in the things that you say you believe in, these folks are actually not capable of delivering that. They keep delivering fascism. Newsom is out sweeping homeless encampments himself with his own hands. I mean, literally, like, I was out there yesterday feeding people with my own hand, and he out there stealing their stuff.
Right. Yep, that's right.
One of these things is not like the other.
Matt Lying Mahan, the mayor of San Jose, he's a liar.
And that's it. And so you just have to, even according to their own, you know, kind of delusional moral scale, there's a cognitive dissonance that you can appeal to that will help unplug folks. And the biggest thing, and sorry, this is very long-winded, but I want to get this in before I forget. It's a very, very important lesson. And I learned this from reading Walter Rodney's History of the Russian Revolution, which was published posthumously from his lecture notes about the Russian Revolution. Walter Rodney pointed out that the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, he said the May Revolution, there were 8,000 Bolsheviks in the whole country. October Revolution, 240,000, still a tiny fraction of the population. And it reminded me of something important. Socialists do not win in revolutionary movements because everybody becomes a socialist. They win because they provide the response to the material needs of the people that the capitalists can never respond. And that should be our laser focus, not an ideological war with them, but rather meeting the basic needs. because people are not fools.
That's right.
When they see that you're able to deliver on healthcare and on housing and on public safety rather than just more police violence, then they're going to want that, because people are not foolish. And you'll win not by changing their ideologies, but by being rooted in a sound understanding yourself and meeting people's material needs.
That's right.
I was just going to piggyback earlier. A great way to find solidarity with people who are not where we're at right now. If you are the example of humanity and providing compassion to those in need, it will trickle down.
Yep.
The only thing that you can do is control your own actions. So make sure that you are standing up, that you are living by example, stand on what you say, and don't budge.
Come on.
There is always someone a step ahead of you that's been a little bit further that can be a guide for you. There is always something more that we can do. And Butch, thank you so much for being here and listening to us. I don't really have a question, but I just want to tell people there is somebody that you can aspire to be, and whether they're in this room or they're each other or they're out there somewhere waiting for us, by just being the example to people, they will want to know what you're on, where you're going.
That's real.
And goodness will find goodness. And
Woo!
also on the knowledge is power. The more you know, the stronger you are. And we are all very much awake in this room. So keep reading, keep studying.
Come on, that's it. And it's a great opportunity to slip in another quote from Malcolm and another quote from Huey. So Malcolm said, do not be in a hurry to condemn. And actually, this goes back to the heart of the question. Malcolm said, do not be in a hurry to condemn. There was a day that you did not know what you know today.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And Huey P. Newton said, also in Revolutionary Suicide, he said that even when someone comes to us with a very bourgeois attitude, I encourage the comrades not to be condescending towards them, but to explain things to them in a patient fashion. And this is again about what you said. Embody the change that you wish to institute. And that means showing up with excellent character, showing up with excellent ethics, leading with your values. Because a lot of times, and this might be a little pointed, but a lot of times leftists are mad self-righteous.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, okay, sorry for this, but a lot of times, a lot of Marxists don't know that Marxism is their religion.
Uh-huh.
So they don't understand that people that are part of religious communities have mechanisms of tolerance that allow them to be around people that don't believe as they do. And the thing is because Marxists don't believe that Marxism is their religion, they often behave in intolerant ways. And it's actually not about ideological tests, it's actually about how you show up in the world. Because what kind of person you are and the way that you show up in service means so much more to people than whatever ideology you're spouting.
Yeah, I always say, don't be change, be evolution.
Amen.
Just, if you're ever taking one step forward, you're going in the right direction. Even if it looks like it's going left or right, and not for political means, but yeah, just
Thank you for that.
stand on that.
Yeah. I think there was also a hand in the way back.
Let's do this one first, and then
Okay.
go to the back.
Thank
Two questions.
you. Real fast, thank you all for this wonderful event and being here and all your support. Just wanted to add, because the flyer said Oakland resistance and solidarity with the campaign, is that there is a huge arms embargo happening in Oakland right now, where we just discovered that there's the second largest shipment of weapons to Israel out of Oakland. And this is shameful when you look at Oakland's history, as where we shut down the largest ship, the Zimline ship, in 2014 from ever coming back to Oakland, and block the boat. We also did Stop Urban Shield, which was training the Israeli military. It took us 8 years, but the Israeli military was training all the heads of police departments out of Oakland, and we finally shut it down. But just to say that this is where the rubber hits the road, and
Yep.
how we embody our practice and our words is through showing up on those front lines. And workers, you know, the longshoremen are with us. We just need to like build solidarity, go talk with them, flyer, and keep an eye out. There's mobilizations happening in the coming days, like September 7th to the 9th. The flotilla might be intercepted, so we're looking at mobilizing around the port of Oakland. And my name is Noura. I'm part of the campaign with Butch, and we would love your support. Please join, volunteer. We have a fabulous volunteer coordinator that will bring you in and plug you in as you see fit. And there's so much happening. We need all your support.
Thank you.
Hi, first and foremost, I wanted to say thank you for serving the people and being here with the people, and I hope we as a community could channel the love that all the great revolutionary communities in the past have. So we spoke a lot on organizing against the system, but it feels like many organizers are still stuck on mobilizing on issues. But it makes a lot of sense considering our constant state of emergency.
Yeah.
Tying back into the successes of the Black Panther Party and their efforts on creating the breakfast program and the clinics, could you speak on some tips or principles organizers can adopt to overcome the main obstacle that's ahead of us today, which is that I feel like our system and our societies have caused our communities to buy into convenience rather than depending on each other.
Excellent question, and delivering that while holding the most precious of cargo. So
That's the future right there, guys.
that's the future, and that's what we're fighting for. That's what we're fighting for. So this is a great opportunity. The core fiction that capitalism embeds in our consciousness is that our success or failure is an individual affair. And everybody focuses inwards on their own personal success. Black excellence replacing Black liberation. So the first part is to undo this inside of ourselves, to understand that it is our ability to show up in service and love to community that defines our moral worth, not the number or nature of our possessions. And as long as capitalism has that kind of hold on our own personal selves, it's going to inhibit our capacity to show up in community. Now, how do we organize on the basis of this? Once we've addressed the enemy in our breast, then now how do we show up to organize? The reason why I wanted to circle back to Kwame Ture is that when it almost sounds like I'm saying mobilization is a bad thing. I'm not saying mobilization is a bad thing. Revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues. Revolutionaries organize against systems. Mobilization appeals to that inherent sense of injustice, and it usually affects our community specifically first. As an African American, the first protest that I attended was because a kid in my neighborhood was killed in his backyard playing with a water gun by a police officer. He was my same age. I was 14 at the time. And then I was marching to end apartheid in South Africa. And from that opening, through the Black radical tradition, that opened me into Che Guevara, that opened me into Mao, that opened me into broader universal histories. So it starts with mobilization around what hits closest to home. But that's why the role that I was prescribing of becoming a teacher and a translator for your own people, you have to respect yourself as an intellectual in this role. Because the people that you're mobilizing with, it becomes your job to help them see the connectedness between the struggle that is right in front of them and the struggle that unites us all. And it's almost always the end that where you have the most skin in the game that brings you in to revolutionary activity. So that's what the mobilizations are for. They allow you to feel empowered, but you cannot let people get stuck in that phase where they're just doing serial mobilization. You have to help guide people towards, okay, are we gonna keep doing this every week? Or are we gonna spend a portion of our time creating an institutional structure that will outlast us? It cannot be episodic. What Kwame Ture said, he said, mobilization is temporary and ephemeral. Organization is permanent and everlasting. We need to be thinking about how to build organizational structures. And I'll just go back, because let's go back to a question. Kwame Ture said, King was a great mobilizer, but he was not a great organizer. Malcolm was a great mobilizer and a great organizer. Everywhere Malcolm went, he left a mosque, or he left an institution that would continue to do the work after he was gone. It can't be dependent on our energy or our efforts or our charisma. We spend our energy and our efforts and whatever personality traits we bring to the struggle to clear a field that others can farm in after we're gone. And that's the difference between mobilization and organization. It's laying down a channel that can carry precious life-giving water when you're not there to tend it. And so it means you're first cultivating those leadership traits in yourself and educating yourself, and then you're identifying those people that have that energy and aptitude that they can become teachers amongst themselves. And last part on this, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. A lot of our leadership wants disciples and sycophants. They don't want fellow soldiers. With God as my witness, I would prefer if someone else was running for office. I don't care. I have no personal ego investment in being the mechanism through which liberation comes. I just want to be of service. If somebody steps up that's better at it, then I will second them. We should be not thinking about how, like, the glory that's going to come to us through leadership. We should be thinking about how we can form a soldier that's better than we ever were. How we can contribute to the creation of the next Assata Shakur, the next Malcolm. Exactly. And that requires a kind of ego sublimation as you are undertaking leadership and teaching tasks that many of us are unwilling to undertake, because it requires probing self-scrutiny. And you sometimes have to say, man, be quiet, take up less space in the room, do less talking and more listening. Right? Because that's leadership too.
Woo!
Alex, last question.
So in the beginning of your talk, you mentioned Rafael al-Ware, who you compared him to being the Malcolm X of Palestine. But so you bringing him up reminded me of something I recently rediscovered from him. So I want to read it out to you. It says, these are extremely important points. 1, don't spend your time in the defense against Zionist propaganda. 2, don't spend more time condemning anti-Semitism. We have blanket rejection of all sorts of racism. 3, never condemn the Palestinian resistance, especially armed struggle. 4, there are no both sides here. The oppressor/occupier can always go to hell. 5, this is about Palestinian lives first and foremost.
Come on! Okay, and that's how we have to go out. So I got 2 things to add. So, and this goes back to a question we were asked before about resistance. So yes, we support the resistance, and how Palestinians choose to resist is up to Palestinians. That is the fundamental basic principle of self-determination. Yes, I want one state from the river to the sea, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan. Right. But if at some point in the process that the resistance decides that it's a strategic imperative to accept something that looks like less than total liberation for us from the outside, shut the hell up and let the people determine what self-determination is going to look like. Right. It is not for us outside to dictate the terms of Palestinian self-determination to Palestinians. It's up to us to apply pressure from the imperial core. The second part goes back to the beginning. Do not waste time arguing with bad faith actors.
Yeah.
And Zionists are bad faith actors by default.
By default. And Toni Morrison said, the function of racism, the very powerful function of racism, is a distraction.
Yes.
It causes you to spend a massive amount of time on unproductive debates and arguments. I am not going to have an argument about my basic human dignity.
Woo!
That's not a topic of conversation. It's not something that I'm going to spend time on. And so Rafat, as always, like I said, never misses. Right? He never misses. We're not going to condemn the resistance. We're not going to talk in circles with Zionists. We're not going to go out of our way to mark ourselves as not anti-Semitic. We are going to keep our sights aimed on Palestinian liberation. We are going to keep our sights raised on black liberation, on indigenous liberation, on trans liberation, on queer liberation, on immigrants' rights, on every manner of liberation until we are all free. And we are going to make this corrupt United States of America, the most dangerous instrument of surveillance and death dealing in human history, we are going to make it live up to every last one of its broken promises to every last one of us.
You should drop them on.
You guys know the Rakim bar, right? I ain't no joke. I used to let the mic smoke. Now I slam it when it's done and make sure it's broke.
Wow. All right. That was. Can't top that. Cool. Thank you, everyone. San Jose Against War, Vigil for Gaza, Black Outreach, and Dr. Butch Ware. Loved having everyone. That was a great set of questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.